period, actually, for testing what free speech means.
It was actually worse than that. You're right, Piers, but it was actually worse than interesting, because what happens is when you censor an entire side of the argument and only allow one side of the argument to have a voice, you are changing reality in real time. You are shaping the world. The only reason that scam continued as long as it did, and the only reason people didn't get to see their own parents get buried, and the only reason people sat and missed cancer appointments because they were scared of the common cold, was because they were censoring anybody who said anything contrary to the purported version of events that the mainstream media decided they want the entire world to swallow. It's beyond simply interesting, and it's beyond simply funny or coincidental.
It looks like they just can't stop this man. They can't stop this man, Andrew Tate. As you can see, Andrew Tate returns to debate Piers Morgan on Elon Musk and free speech. They try to ban this man. He's unbannable, if that's even a word. He just can't be banned. And they tried him the first interview. Morgan really tried him the first interview, you know. Just every single time he would ask a question to Andrew, or he'll, fire at Andrew, and Andrew would try to respond. He wouldn't allow Andrew to say anything at all, and everyone, the entire world saw that. And I'm sure he had a ton of backlash. And however, their interview, I think, had the best performance in their entire platform. I think they garnered about 6 million views, and now they just can't stop this man. And I don't know, from it looks like it, they've only uploaded this video 2 days ago, and they've had 3 million views already. 3 million views already. Crazy. But I mean, this interview, it seemed like it might be a lot better than the first one. So let's see how round 2 goes. Hopefully he doesn't interrupt him as much. Hopefully he's actually gonna allow him to say what he wants to say. So yeah, let's get into it.
Well, joining me now is Andrew Tate, whose videos have been viewed billions of times online, but he's been banned from pretty much every mainstream social media platform, including Twitter. Andrew Tate, welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Your take on this, I think, is quite interesting, because you've been a victim of being, if victim's the right word, but you've been removed from social media platforms for your opinions. Elon Musk has dedicated himself, he says, to restoring free speech. Do you think that's going to include you, for example?
I don't think it matters if it includes me or not. I think what's important is that free speech is the #1 weapon against absolute tyranny. And although you cannot have complete free speech, because then conversations completely break down into asinine insult fests, I do like the idea of the changing of the guard when it comes to control over information.
Is it possible, Andrew Tate, to actually police something like Twitter, to be a platform for genuine free speech? Or is it so toxic and tribal now that whatever happens, before we had all the people on the right screaming away that they were being no platformed and so on. Now you've got all the people on the left screaming that they're being diminished in some way. It's very tribal, very toxic. Can Musk cut through that? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult. There's always going to be one group of people who are extremely unhappy, but I think that anybody who's perspicacious enough to understand the truth of what's been going on in the world recently will know that the left and their narratives have certainly been protected for a very long time. And the universe has swings and balances, and God often restores balance to the universe, and perhaps it might swing the other way for a while. I truthfully am a person who believes that all points of view are extremely important, because as soon as you block points of view, you have absolute tyranny.
Well said, because I couldn't even say it any better. It's impossible to block one set viewpoint, then what's the point of even having a discourse? What's the point of even having a conversation if you're choosing to block another person's perspective? If you ask a question and you have two different views, you want both side of, those, you want both side of that answer. You basically want different lenses, that way you can be able to generalize or narrow in, an answer or something, or get somewhere. But like he said, it's completely asinine. If you choose to just block one side or try to shut one side down, it doesn't make sense at all.
And in a way, it's sort of self-defeating, isn't it? Because you carried on getting huge attention. It was interesting to me that when you came on the show, for example, we've had, I think, nearly 6 million people have viewed the whole interview that we did, which is a huge number of people, certainly far higher than watched it on conventional television. So you have a whole world out there online which operates away from social media platforms.
Yeah, I've been very, very successful in spite of them, but not many people can do that. I'm in a pretty unique position. But I think that everybody needs a voice to a degree, and social media platforms are now the most important platforms on the planet.
So I don't mean to interrupt this, but yeah, like he said, Andrew Tate, I don't think he needed this. Not really. He was only using social media to, make a difference in young men's lives. I feel as though the bans did absolutely nothing at all. This man is still wealthy, and he has a lot of money. He's doing a lot of big things, so he doesn't really need any of those things at all. In fact, the bans even made him more popular, garnered him a lot of money. He's just unbannable. Like he can't be stopped, 100%.
They control information and they influence real world decisions, and they influence people's perception of reality. The last few years of COVID have been a perfect example of what happens when you censor one side of the argument and you only allow one point of view to be purported by the matrix in and of itself, and that's how you end up in tyrannical situations. I think you were just discussing that, Piers.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly valid point. People have quite rightly held me to task over some of the positions I took during the COVID pandemic, notably when the scientists said as a definitive fact that you couldn't transmit the virus if you had the vaccine. It turned out that wasn't true. And I based my observations on that supposed fact and said, right, well, in that case, if you refuse to be vaccinated, you shouldn't get the same rights as people who've been vaccinated. If it's true that if you're unjabbed, you can pass it on. It turned out, actually, there's not much difference whether you've been vaccinated or not. And at that point, I changed my mind. But I felt that there were a lot of people who were being deplatformed from Twitter at the time for questioning the validity of scientific statements, and they would then be a complete U-turn. So I do think it was a very interesting period, actually, for testing what free speech means.
It was actually worse than that. You're right, Piers, but it was actually worse than interesting, because what happens is when you censor an entire side of the argument and only allow one side of the argument to have a voice, you are changing reality in real time. You are shaping the world. The only reason that scam continued as long as it did, and the only reason people didn't get to see their own parents get buried, and the only reason people sat and missed cancer appointments because they were scared of the common cold, was because they were censoring anybody who said anything contrary to the purported version of events that the mainstream media decided they want the entire world to swallow. It's beyond simply interesting, and it's beyond simply funny or coincidental.
I will challenge you on one thing. It's not the common cold, right? COVID-19 has killed 6.6 million people. It is one of the most deadly viruses, certainly of our lifetime. So it wasn't the common cold, but I do think it is completely justified for people to say we should be more cautious, I think, about accepting during fast-moving pandemics the word of scientists as being sacrosanct, because on a number of things, from the use of masks to the efficacy of vaccines in preventing transmission, they did massive U-turns.
I've read enough history books to know that the people who do the censoring are never the good guys. And they've been censoring a lot of arguments for a very long time in the name of good. They are weaponizing virtue, and it's always in the name of tyranny. Anybody who is out here trying to silence an entire side of an argument on any subject, whether it's COVID-19, immigration, anything else, they are the evil people who are out for absolute mind control of the populace. And they should be feared.
I certainly agree. I certainly agree that I think the healthiest thing for any democracy is for all views to be aired and debated. We seem to have lost the ability to debate. You know, when I interviewed you, yeah, we had a few fractious moments, but actually, I thought it was a pretty spirited debate between people who perhaps had, you know, preconceived views of each other. And I've got no problem interviewing you now about these because I think you have an interesting take on this stuff.
And that's the key to life. When you reach that level of adolescence in your mindset where you can't handle any point of view that is contrary to your own, then you're truly a broken person. And that's what the internet is purporting. It's very interesting you said about Twitter being tribal. There's a large contingent of people on Twitter who simply cannot handle reading an opinion which differs from their own. And that is a degree of immaturity that we do not need adults to be functioning with in the modern world.
No, I agree. If you were Elon Musk, this idea of charging $8 now a month, whatever it is, to access the blue tick premium Twitter account, would you do that? Would you pay the extra?
I think that social media companies for a very long time have lived in an absolute fantasy where they've printed money from thin air by charging people for pixels. And they grew into these large conglomerates with too many staff sitting around doing nothing, having coffee breaks. And Elon Musk is a businessman. He's walked into the office and he's firing a bunch of people who are messing around doing nothing. And he wants his business to make money, as it absolutely should. And how he decides that happens is his prerogative. I don't see why we should sit and accept that a website needs 200,000 people sitting around discussing in long meetings, sitting on beanbags about policy of human rights of some garbage. When he's come along and said, no, I'm a businessman. We're going to charge for our service. We're going to reduce the number of staff. And we're going to be a functional, coherent company, as they should be. And it's his prerogative to do it as he's bought the company. I think he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree because I remember the...
I mean, well said. I don't think anyone should question, you know, this man, Elon, on his policies on how he wants to run the... his company, especially this company being a really bad company that were silencing a ton of people. They even silenced the president, Donald Trump. I mean, you're silencing people for speaking their opinion. They're not telling people to go murder X, Y, and Z people. Even those people are still, you know, there, but you're silencing people that, you know, speaking their own opinions and stuff. It made no sense. So you can't really, you know, question the owner for how he wants to run his company. It doesn't make sense.
Appalling censorship of the New York Post exclusive about Hunter Biden, the son of the president, about his laptop. This is 3 weeks before the election that Joe Biden won. He was heading, you know, to a possible victory, but it was tight. And that story, they reckon, could have tipped it either way. But it was completely suppressed and censored, starting with Twitter, then Facebook, then others. Twitter literally locked out the New York Post account for 2 weeks for breaking a completely true story. I thought that was shameful.
It's worse than shameful. It's worse than shameful. When you control information, you control the real world. They affect the real world in real time. They are genuinely affecting the reality people live in. They are not just a company. They're not just a social media platform. It affects absolutely every single person on the planet when it changes who is elected. I don't want to comment specifically on Hunter Biden or the laptop. I would never kill myself, but I don't think it's fair that they would hide certain key information that close to an election. And the fact that they've done that was done specifically to affect the world that we all live in. And we all have to suffer the consequences of those things. So to sit and say that these companies can just do whatever they want, they're private, etc. No, free speech is beyond important for democracy. It's important for the reality that we exist under.
Andrew Tate, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, friend.
I mean, this is what I got to say. This is all I got to say. This interview was far better. I know it was just 9 minutes, but a lot better than the first interview they had. And And the first interview was just crazy because this man just kept interjecting. You would ask a question and you wouldn't let him speak. You wouldn't let him, give his own beliefs or thoughts. You couldn't even allow him to even freely process the whole question, and then just interject. And you would ask him a question that didn't even, relate to his own thing he was doing. So, but this is a lot better. I know this puppet guy, Morgan. I know he got a ton of backlash. And he probably realized that he was probably being excuse my language, a-hole to Andrew and how he interviewed him. But, you can't interview someone that way. I'm proud of how he interviewed Andrew this time. Job well done. This video was good. It was good, So if y'all like this interview as well, and you guys think Morgan did a lot better than the first interview, make sure you leave a thumbs up. For more. I'm gonna bring a lot of bangers. I'll have a lot of people here come in. Gas food. It's gonna be fun. I think this is gonna be great. Yeah, man. We out.